everybody. We've got Pat White here, CEO and founder of Bitwave, with another quick hits. This is not a story in the mainstream media, but very important, especially for the finance and accounting industry. The SEC just put out a statement. This is Paul Munter, the chief accountant, says the potential pitfalls of purported crypto assurance work. Pat, would love to get your thoughts on this.
Well, the first thing that came up to mind for me, which was so funny, is like this felt like a direct letter to some of the people we work with. We work with a lot of folks. He says at the beginning of the letter, there are a lot of new entrants into the audit space doing, crypto audits, paraphrasing, crypto proof of reserves audits, non PCOAB covered audits. And we work with a lot of those folks. And I couldn't help but be like, wow, what's it feel like to get a public letter directed almost directly at you? But I don't know. A part of me also said, if you're getting a letter from the SEC right now, maybe you're doing something right in life. I don't know. That's a tough one to kind of call out. It's a super interesting situation where basically, the way I read this letter, it wasn't really particularly news in the way that it was like a police chief getting up and saying, hey guys, if you commit murder, that's illegal and you can go to prison. Like everyone knew a lot of the stuff that he said here. It's basically that, when you're doing some form of audit that is not a full financial statement audit, you are, it's an agreed upon procedure by the ethical rules. And I think some of the actual stated rules of public accounting, you are not supposed to be releasing that information. So at the point at which you are releasing agreed upon procedures, you are opening yourself up to liability because you are misrepresenting, especially if you call it an audit, you're misrepresenting what you're actually doing. And there's legislation, stuff like that. Everyone that we work with knows that. And it's a topic that we talk about a lot, is that people get nervous around proof of reserves because no one has come out and said anything about it. So it's a non-story in some ways, like you said, because it really is. It's someone getting up and saying, this is not, don't do this because it's wrong. And everyone should probably know it's wrong to some extent. But it also is, it's hard also not to read this as a little bit vindictive. I don't know if that's fair or not, but it's really hard not to be like, oh, you lost a big court case, and the next week you just release a letter saying not to do something that people shouldn't be doing anyways. Why are we what are we? This is purely just to knock Bitcoin around a little bit.
Totally.
I don't know.
And for context, what this basically talks about is there's a potential liability for auditors and accounting firms if they're auditing a company that commits fraud and they somehow are implicit in this. Auditor independence, which is kind of the bedrock of auditing. None of these things are new. And so I agree, it's easy to look at this and knowing what's going on with the SEC and say, is this because you're a little bitter? It's like, hey, fine, they're not securities, but auditors, watch out, because you'll get busted if you touch this industry.
Yeah, and honestly, none of the big four were doing proof of reserve audits. None of them are doing agreed upon procedures like this that get released. Now, the thing that is interesting that Trevor just mentioned, which is worth re-mentioning, is the work that some of these proof of reserve guys are doing. The reason it's agreed upon procedure is there's not a generalized set of rules that you follow that you then are held to make sure you're following correctly. And if you do all that, then you're protected from liability in some extent. The reason this is an issue is that I come to you and say, hey, I want you to do a proof of reserve. Here's how it's going to work. I'm going to give you my wallet addresses. Then I'm going to sign something that proves I have that. And then you're going to write this up and say there was a proof of reserve audit. The point at which you've done that, you've now created a compromising situation for your auditor, because you've negotiated what you're going to do with your auditor, and then they're going to do it back to you. And so if you have particular ways you're going to commit fraud, if you're going to transfer funds in, then transfer them out the next day, you can design that procedure to miss the fraud. And so that's why accounting procedures exist, and they have very clear guidelines about what you look at and how you look at it and what you're doing on periodicity and all that kind of stuff. So it's a good rule in the general, but it also points to the fact that this is what drives me crazy about the SEC is why didn't they why didn't they open up for comments about how to do proof of
Yeah.
reserve? Because it's a really important thing. And like, look at Silicon Valley Bank, who just failed because they didn't have enough reserves. Like, we're sitting here bashing. Okay, now I'm getting angry. Shoot, darn! I thought I was gonna be happy on this one. Like, we're sitting here bashing companies for doing for like these non-standard audits or these agreed upon procedures. But at the end of the day, like, wouldn't have been great if we actually had some agreed upon procedures for doing some sort of proof of reserve auditing that the banks were responsible for following. And so, like, why is the SEC going after these guys instead of actually, doing
Yeah.
general helpful work?
Exactly. That's a great point. And I think big picture, especially for me having been a former auditor, the goal is to provide reasonable assurance is the term to the public, especially for, public companies, but private companies as well, that the numbers that companies report are legit and they're not just made up. For exchanges that they have the assets that they say they have. And so it's interesting because yes, I think we're all in favor of this. Like, be mindful of your liability, of your independence. But it's to your point, we could have a clear framework. We could have guidance. Hey, auditors come in and opine on how to do this. So
That's it.
overall, I think it's a good message, but you kind of wonder about the intent, especially with
Yeah.
what's going on with the SEC.
Yeah, 100%.
All right, folks. Well, good stuff. Thanks for hopping on, Pat, to explain this to us here.
Thanks so much, everybody. Have a great weekend. It's Friday today, so have a great weekend.
Yep. Have a good one, guys.